edition of the Orlando webinar series. Today, we will be looking at the state of insecurity in Nigeria and determining whether we're at a tipping point right now or not. And to do justice to this discourse today, I have with me on the panel, Mr. Ozumba Mbadiwe, who is the Executive Secretary and CEO of the Ogun State Security Trust Fund. Thank you. Welcome, Okwemi. I was about to say Okwemi had also served on the board of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. With Okwemi, I have Mr. Patrick Agbambu, who is the President and CEO of Security Watch Africa Initiative. And I also have retired Captain Ali Umar Babangida, who is currently the CEO of Goldwater and Riverside Consults.
Good morning.
Good morning. Jumoke will be joining us shortly. That's Jumoke Ayodele, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at NYU. That's the New York University. She sent a message in apologizing for running late for logistical reasons. To all of us Nigerians, our commitment is in the national anthem that we sing, we recite from time to time. The first stanza, the very last line of that stanza says, "One nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity." One nation. The Nigerian entity remaining one nation, continuing to be one nation, bound in freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of movement. It had always been at our risk to move freely around Nigeria. But no time in the history of this country has it ever been riskier to do so than now. Peace, the bedrock for prosperity. Nothing thrives in an atmosphere of strife. Without peace, there's no meaningful prosperity. And we can see that our peace is currently being challenged significantly. Unity. The voice of secession had never been loudest than it is now, not even during the Civil War. And in the same spirit of the anthems, I take you to the second stanza and the last line, and another commitment to build a nation where peace and justice reign. Okwemi, how far off would you say we have veered from this commitment?
Well, thank you very much, Demola. At the very least, the commitment to peace, unity, security, freedom of our people, as you have rightly said, is at probably one of the highest levels ever since independence. And I must commend Oando and yourselves for putting this conversation together. I think that what strikes me as we ponder these questions of insecurity, threats to unity, agitation, and all of that, is that we must start by focusing not on the symptoms we see, but on the fundamental causes driving the symptoms we see. So in relation to this conversation around security, we have to remove our emotions and focus on what do we think is driving all of this. And I will argue that one, at the level of families, we must focus on education of our youth. We must focus on engagement. We must focus on engaging the youth, keeping them employed, giving them skills and competencies. We must try to eliminate harmful cultural practices, socio-cultural practices that make our youth become area boys, or what almajiri, or otherwise become touts or political talks, all of that. Parenting and families, all of those are fundamental causes at the level of socio-cultural factors, that poverty and unemployment, and maybe even corruption as a driver of economic inequality. So we have to focus on all of those. One of the other points that I must stress is that insecurity is now not just a political problem or a government problem or a problem for the military and the defense corps and intelligence agencies. It's become a major driver of economic stagnancy. So we all now have an economic incentive, a vast economic incentive to ensure that we deal with this. Insecurity is now driving low GDP growth, is a contributor to decline in investment, foreign and domestic investment. We now have massive taxes on communities and families across the country, from bandits and kidnappers, imposing onerous taxation on hundreds and thousands of families and communities and forcing them to pay funds that they don't have, sometimes to borrow, to sell their property, to sell their farm yield in order to pay bounties to kidnappers and bandits. It's driving down some sectors, including agriculture, transport, trade, haulage, all of those things. So we're talking about a factor that threatens the political unity of the country and that also threatens the economic stability of the nation. I think I can stop at that point and elucidate on other issues I would like to raise later.
Thank you. That's that's an interesting point of view to have, recognizing that it is issues beneath the symptoms that we must look at. First off, looking at how we design and engage skills acquisition programs for the young, ensuring that they're meaningfully engaged, and then looking at what issues that have been thrown up by these current situations that we see, whether it's in the Northeast or Northwest, or even in the Niger Delta, or the Southwest, or in the Middle Belt as well, across the country, as a matter of fact. And then recognizing that it is no longer a kinetic solution to be provided by the government, but one that requires a collaborative effort from everyone as a collective. And in the light of that, welcoming Jumoke. Jumo, thanks for joining us. I already introduced you, so they were expecting you. That's the audience. And this is also to let the audience know, feel free to make comments in the comment box, and also ask questions if you have any, but put those in the Q&A section, not the comment box. It's only the questions that I see in the Q&A section that I will take. But I'm coming to you, Jumoke. Speaking to these elements and looking at the human factor, it's often been said that those who bear the brunt of any state of insecurity are usually children and women, all right? But it goes beyond them, okay? Men are affected adversely as well. And it's not a local problem, it's a global problem. We see that insecurity is a challenge that the entire world faces. One of the biggest example that we have today is the degeneration of the security situation in Afghanistan, within a very short period of time, with the US military pulling out of that environment, and then the Taliban just took over. Now, I don't particularly think that spells doom for the nation, because it may just be the government that the country needs, okay? But all of these elements are, things that we see on the surface. And then, as Okwemi was saying earlier about the levers that drive these elements, from your own studies, from the research that you've done on a global scale into Africa, down to Nigeria, what do you see? Where is Nigeria in the play of things? And how do you reckon that we need to stop this current situation and then begin to dial back the hands of insecurity back to where we used to be?
Thank you, Demola, for that question. And thank you to the organizers of this webinar and Owando for the invitation to talk about the state of insecurity in Nigeria. And I will first begin my comments by speaking to my work, as you alluded, and research, which really focuses on the intersection among conflict, human security, and local political stability in really understanding Nigeria's current security crisis. In the last decade, Nigeria has unfortunately experienced an increase in the number of violent incidents involving armed groups, civilians, and security forces. And the country's security challenges revolve around 4 different but overlapping threats. The first relates to the 11-year insurgency being waged by the violent movement Boko Haram. The second threat comes from intercommunal clashes that we see between pastoralists and farmers that involve long-standing tensions related to land and access to water. The third threat is from armed gangs and militias engaged in kidnapping for ransom, who have multiple motives ranging from economic interest to political interest. And the final security threat that we're seeing right now is linked to secessionist movements that we're seeing in southwestern as well as southeastern Nigeria. Yet, when we are faced with these domestic security threats, which are very complex in their own rights, Nigerian government authorities have generally tended to deploy its own security forces. And this decision to employ military measures, a very heavy-handed approach, continues to stem from the perceived relative military capacity that the government feels that its security institution has when compared to violent extremist groups or violent groups operating in the country. And while these military operations have been successful in their own rights, with arrest and killings of perpetrator groups, the rescuing of kidnapped persons, and the recovery of illegal munitions from criminal gangs and pastoralist militias, the continued increase of casualty and the growing instability that we see in the country across all 6 geopolitical zones suggests that these tactical gains made against groups are insufficient to restore stability as well as protect communities. And we see that in the last 10 years, these non-armed groups themselves have demonstrated that they're innovative, they are flexible, and that they are adaptive to change. They have been able to launch attacks in neighboring states, and in the case of Boko Haram, in multiple countries. They have also been able to take advantage of our burgeoning youth population and the slowdown of economic activities due to the COVID-19 lockdown measures that the government instituted that have somewhat resulted in high unemployment and inflation rates. However, I do think that there are opportunities for us to create the Nigeria we want. First, in the same way that non-state actors have evolved, our security frameworks also have to evolve in order to reinforce the capacity of state security forces. And one way to do that, and a lot of our panelists are going to be talking about this, is to include more local actors in the framework at the local, state, as well as federal levels. In stabilizing Nigeria, these actors cannot be understated. So research institutions, traditional leaders, religious leaders, women, youth, they are all important stakeholders in helping to manage our various local conflicts and in facilitating the implementation of non-military strategies that can ensure that the needs of vulnerable populations are heard as well as responded to. Second, more emphasis must be placed on developing essential infrastructure, especially in undergoverned areas by all levels of government, the private sector, as well as partner countries. For far too long, we continue to focus on fund military operations and security sector reform, but more funding is needed for these development initiatives because they really do address the root causes of insecurity across all 6 geopolitical zones. And third, we as a country must see ourselves as Nigerian first, not as Yoruba, not as Igbo or Hausa or any other tribes, in really implementing effective military as well as non-military measures that are able to address new as well as emerging security threats. And we can do this by improving collaboration and coordination and increasing data management and data coordination and capacity between state security institutions, federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as local communities. As I previously alluded, non-state actors are learning from each other in their efforts to expand their zones of influence. We too must learn from our successes and failures, noting aspects of our strategies and policy as a country that have worked and aspects that need improvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jumoke. It's difficult for me to not assume that you read that out. You know? I will continue to try to be that articulate. Hopefully I'll succeed someday. Now, speaking about military intervention, military capacity, you know, and all, you know, some of the things that you spoke to. Captain Ali, we are aware of the crackdown that's going on in Zamfara right now, all right, as reported. But at the same time as that, you know, is going on, the military, you know, ensuring that they, you know, roll back the hands of bandits and terrorists and kidnappers in Zamfara. In parallel to that, we still see kidnappings going on in Katsina, Kaduna, you know. Is the military spread too thin? What would you say, Captain?
Good morning, my lady and gentlemen panelists, and indeed all participants. Quite glad to be here. In response to your question, I want to take it in a way that is as simplistic, but then so our listeners, particularly the participants now in this, would understand. You see, in civil life, there is always this thing you do before you raise your house. You come with plans. I recall after leaving service, I had to build a house. So there was an electricity plan, there was a plumbing plan, there was so many plans, you know. It's not different with military operations, particularly as it involves the Northeast. What we are largely seeing is the military plan. There have to be other plans. There are a lot of what I want to call resource assets that are not being seen yet by all concerned. For example, we are looking at a situation where some 38 schools so far have been suspended. The reason why is because there was no plan. I share the American experience somewhere in the 30s when the American Depression hit. I think it was 29 or so, 29, 33. And what did America do? The economy was so bad that they had to close schools down and in fact number schools. So schools didn't have names. They just say, go to school number 1, go to school number 2, go to school number 3. Coming back home, in the 70s, when I was young, I think there was a challenge that had to make us split schools into morning and evening sessions. Some people may be too young among our participants to know what I'm talking about. But some of us went to school from 8 to, was it 12 or 2? And then some went from 2 to, was it 4 or 6? It was all meant to conform with whatever the challenges of that time were. Now, no less today, we are seeing a situation where everything about the Northeast, everything about kidnapping, everything about banditry is guns, bullets, and boots. But like the building I spoke about, there has to be a plan. If we had a military plan, but we didn't have an education plan, we didn't have an economic plan, all of these things are, how do I put it now? They are mutually complementing. Okay, they are mutually complementing. So much so that if you look at it in a lighter mood, if the soldiers don't eat, can they fight? So why don't we have an agricultural plan to sustain probably our rural farmers and their threatened farms from the blunder and the destruction it is going through? And where we don't, would it be surprising if 2-3 years down the line, our food supply or our food security figures begin to dwindle? And if food security figures dwindle and soldiers can't even be fed optimally, not to talk about citizens, can we begin to say we can be protected? So as my lady has said, Dr. Olajumoke, there is indeed this correlationship between all and sundry that is so silent but very salient in Nigeria. We must be able to look beyond the bullets, beyond the guns and the boots and see the other little subtleties that tend to actually affect this big picture in very, very significant ways. I hope I have made some sense here.
Absolutely.
I don't want to go into military terminologies. I want to carry everybody along.
Absolutely, Captain. I mean, you're right about the need for a plan, okay? And where there is a plan, because you do a dump before you finalize your plan, you putting the right people in the room then affords you the opportunity to cover all bases, whether it's an agricultural program that may be the solution for a problem, but then ends up triggering a revolution that, places Nigeria as a regional agricultural powerhouse, okay? So what you're trying to do is to get people busy, but it then turns out that as they get busy, that sector booms so much that it then becomes, a sector that, perhaps even earns us significant foreign currency or revenue. That said, however, it's clear, even from what Juma said, okay, that the interaction between the government, aka military in this context, and the people is essential, because the non-state actors themselves they perhaps even have a stronger interaction with the people that they're terrorizing, right, than perhaps, government agencies do. And this is to you, Patrick. Your own work, I know, has taken you to the grassroots. You've gone to the community levels to understand, how this whole system came about and how it's been resolved and what direction it's facing. What do we need to do more of or less of to ensure that that synergy between the people, the communities, and government, come together to help us beat this current situation?
Thank you, Wando. Thank you, Ademola, for this session. Thank you, co-panelists and participants. It's a pleasure to actually be part of this, and I have looked forward to this because this is one thing that Nigerians need to. A conversation on issues of insecurity in the country is very, very important. Yes, directly to what you just said, I'm happy that the three panelists that spoke before me have actually touched on a number of issues that really affects insecurity in Nigeria. To go direct to what you said, the biggest challenge we're having is what I could say that is divided into two sectors of criminality we have in Nigeria. We have the grassroots insecurity that is going on, which affects this mass kidnapping and Boko Haram adventure in the Northeast and all that. Then we have the urban crime, which also not unrelated again to some kidnapping and all the agitations we're having, which tend to threaten the unity and the peace of the country. Now, coming to the rural or the crisis that affects most of our community, because most of the mass kidnapping that has been taking, adoption that has been taking place are happening in areas where not easily accessible, not the urban or semi-urban areas, especially in the Northeast and the Northwest and sometimes in North Central. I have visited some of those places and I found out that the biggest problem is non-communication, like you pointed out earlier, between the government, not even the security agencies, the government, the political class, and the communities. I was just discussing with somebody yesterday, and I did say that most of these communities, when I visited them after some of the attacks, they would say, look, they never see any of these politicians or their representative come to them, maybe until there's election period or after election, and after that, they disappears. The only people they interact with, the only people they have confidence to discuss with are these so-called non-state actors that are carrying arms against them. Just like Captain Ali said, when you see somebody who is terrorizing you and you see him or her as even a friend, that makes it very, very worrisome. They give information, they can easily tell those bandits or whoever is coming to attack that the security agencies just came, they told us that they are coming back again, so please stay away and all that. So there's the disconnect in communication. There's absence of governance in most of all these communities. There's absence of governance, so there's absence of amenities. Most of them do not feel that they owe any allegiance or they are part of the government or the country called Nigeria. I visited a community where to me, I don't think they're even part of this country because they don't feel belonging to what we're talking about, and it's so alienated. So the biggest problem is those who they're elected or those elected people are not going back to these communities to build confidence with them that they will be able to provide solution to their problems. That is on that side. So it's becoming something not today. It's been there right from beginning, and so now the society have lost hope in the people in government, have lost hope even in security forces. They've also lost hope even in the country. To them, the government they know and they respect are these bandits and are these non-state actors. Some may say because of fear, but they feel that these people provide them some level of protection, provide them some level of succor. In some places, they provide them charities. In Northeast particularly, I know that in the Lake Chad Basin, there is a kind of a takafu, the Islamic system of insurance and Islamic system of arms giving that Boko Haram and ISWAP provides to some of these communities as a way of buying them to their side. And so these are some of the challenges that we're having. Now, when we talk about the urban insecurity that we're also having, the problem there is that, like we all know, there's a lot of disconnects, even in the family circle. The morals, like my brother Agbaje did say earlier, the families are a bit disconnected. They don't educate their children any longer as it used to be in the past. There are no values. The value system has changed. Now, people believe that I would rather want to make it quicker, and that is when I will be respected in the society. And in any means, in any way forward, in any way I can achieve that, I achieve that, whether it's through crime or through any means. And in fairness, these people are the people that are respected in the societies. So these are the factors. So what we need to do is the accumulative of what some of my panelists have actually said. We need to go back to the basis, not treating the symptoms, but go back and find out where did we get it wrong. Communicate more with the citizens, especially those in the rural areas who are now at the receiving end of the terror that is all over the country, whether in the southwest or where you see farmers being attacked. People don't want to go to farm any longer because of fear of being attacked by one armed group or the other, or in the northeast or northwest, north central, even south. I was talking with somebody yesterday. I said, even in south, there's a state in Nigeria that you have so many IDPs in south because they are afraid of cultists who have taken and chased them away from their communities into the forest and into the bushes. So we need to be able to go back to the basis and replan and find out how best can we get the families back again to respect the issue of morals. That is the basics.
Wow, you have unloaded a lot of stuff in there. I had asked Captain earlier, if the military was overstretched, and it appears to me like the society itself is overstretched. the government itself seem overstretched because there are far too many ungoverned areas, and I've often said that as citizens, we owe it to one another to do at least one of these four things. Get your voter's card and vote. At least vote. All right? Vote in the kind of government that you would like to see and canvass for whoever it is you believe in. Number two, join a political party. It doesn't matter which one. At least be a member of a political party, contributing your quota to whatever it is the philosophy of that political party may be. Or number three, be an executive council member, whether at the local level, state level, or federal level, of such a party. So that at least you get the chance to be a delegate when the primaries are being held and the candidates that will represent the parties are being chosen, so that you are part of those who will determine the quality of representation that we get from the parties. And then number four, if you're so inclined, run for office yourself. Because anytime we speak to certain lapses or ineptitude in governance, and speak to the fact that some of the representations that we have seen are best representations of self-interest and not the people who have put them in office, I take it back to us. I take it back to the people. We are the ones that are responsible for whatever it is that we eventually see in the political class. So we have to participate in that regard. But be that as it may, Okwayemi, looking at what, of course, Patrick said, what Captain has said, and to my question about whether the military is overstretched, because we see pockets of different types of violence or crime or insecurity across the country. Is it a time, or has that time come for us to look very seriously into regional, at least, or state police?
In fact, as each of my colleagues, even Jumoke, alluded to the issue of devolving. She may not have used those words, the management of security. And Patrick in particular, the natural implication of what they both said, I was getting eager to make precisely this point. And that is that the case for decentralizing policing in Nigeria is no longer challengeable on a rational basis. There's no rational reason why anybody will continue to insist that a single police force governed from Abuja should be the sole authority policing the whole of the landmass of Nigeria. And in my position, I see that very clearly. But even from what everybody else has said, we're having a complete breakdown of law and order. We're having a devolution into anarchy. Why don't we have a devolution into the management, a decentralized system of managing security? Now, I partly understand why we are refusing to take these actions. In spite of all logic, in spite of all reason. And it's bound up with my next point, which is that, unfortunately, these security issues that we deal with in Nigeria today have become bound up in very emotive political conversations. So you have restructuring, and that stirs up some fears in some people. And you have Fulani herdsmen or bandits, and that immediately stirs up some. And you have even the word state police has become part of that lingua of political contention, instead of a sensible conversation about how do we secure this country. And that's what we need. If the conversation is a sensible conversation about securing Nigeria, I doubt that anybody in his rational, in a calm appraisal of the situation would argue that we need to decentralize policing. So we're looking for all sorts of fixes. The federal police is looking for all sorts of fixes. Community policing that is controlled by the federal police. And we want to call it community policing. And on the other hand, the states are looking for solutions. So we have Amotekun, we have all of those things. So the reality is that the case for decentralizing police is no longer in doubt. Indeed, the existence of agencies such as the one that I run, the Ogun State Security Trust Fund, and the pioneer of that model, which I served for 8 years on the board, Lagos State, the rationale itself for their creation suggests that there's something wrong and that we need to decentralize resourcing and other aspects of policing in Nigeria. So I would urge people, especially those concerned with the management of security, to divorce political security conversations from politics and political affairs. And in order for that to happen, government has to be seen to be unbiased concerning some of the conflicts that we have, and to take a role that through government, the role of government to arbitrate law and order. And that's the role that government has to take. So, I mean, the direct answer to your question, Ademola, is that absolutely, we must decentralize police. Indeed, a model is imagined, and that's why a policy abhors a vacuum. Because government has refused to take that step, a reality is imagined in which many of our local communities are policed by vigilantes and Amotekun and all of that. And then we're going to have some model inevitably of state policing over time. And then Amotekun and such vigilantes at the local level. I think we need to do that in a rational process rather than allow them to emerge in a de facto form, rather than by the creation of laws and policies.
Thanks, thank you. They say crime is local, all right? And therefore you have to fight it with local security architecture. And I'm coming to you, Jumoke, I'm sure you know this already. And, Okwayemi spoke to a number of things. And I see here that one of the most important points he made is about the branding of the problem or the solution, as the case may be. So when you label something Fulani herdsmen, I noticed, by the way, Jumoke, that earlier you had called them, I think, militant pastoralists, right? Which is, it's an important divergence from saying Fulani herdsmen, because when you tribalize the problem, you politicize the problem. When you say Niger Delta terrorists, or you say, the moment you tribalize the problem, you then, of course, automatically invite politics into it. And in the same breath, as you begin to then say, perhaps we should, push the case for state policing at this time, again, that then begins to sound more like tribal policing at this time. So, and all of that speaks, to a negation of the old sense of national unity and oneness, and and this may be some of the mental barriers that we have towards advancing this agenda. But from your own well-researched academic point of view, what role do you see a rebranding and relabeling of all of these issues playing in how to move the agenda forward to solve this current debacle?
Thank you, Demola, for that question. That's a very loaded question, and I'm going to try to answer it from an academic point of view. So with the rebranding and Nigeria and the politicization of ethnicity, I think this is where our media plays a very big role. Our media is supposed to be our watchdog, and it's supposed to be a forum or a platform where they communicate public preferences and policies to our state leaders. And for the most part, most of our journalists and our media have taken an ethnic tone. If you read newspapers from Southern Nigeria, when you compare the same issues to the newspapers being written by Northern Nigeria, you see that there's a disconnect. So that politicization and, that us versus them, the media has to see itself as an independent watchdog. And that platform to communicate, as one of our panelists has said, between government officials, political elites, and local community leaders, because they are a basis for data. When you think about it, when you're a data analyst, where are you getting your primary data from? You're getting it from newspapers, you're getting it from policy briefs. And newspapers and the facts that journalists report also inform the way that we view policies and also inform the way that we view other ethnicities, whether it's your neighbor or other tribes. And that's why we have to call them to part to be and to say that you have a responsibility to make us one Nigeria. That's one. Two, we need to bring in our tech sector. We have a very booming tech sector in Nigeria, and we haven't necessarily leveraged our tech sector with collating data and with creating a knowledge warehouse. A knowledge warehouse, for example, where community leaders, where state agencies, where state security forces can access and use that to implement or to design whatever policies or strategies that they are thinking about. I think tech is the future for Nigeria. Leveraging our tech sector that we have in Yaba right now is the way forward, because, as I said, these non-state actors, they're flexible, they're adaptive, and we too also have to move with the times, with being adaptive, with being flexible, and that's where tech comes in. Thank you.
Absolutely. So PsyOps is required. And I think Captain Ali understands this well in military engagement, right? Using communication to shape minds, and then, of course, you lead with that before you then engage with, any kinetic solution. But what I see in our environment today is that the PsyOps has become, almost irrelevant in the way we engage. It's been downplayed, and then, as we deliver military solutions, we find that we don't even have the people on our side. That said, however, Captain Ali, a colleague of mine walked into my office this morning, and she wanted to know if it was tipping point for her and her family to leave the country, or if there was still hope, because she didn't think that the government was doing enough to protect Nigerians. Of course, I didn't have the answer, so I told her to wait. I promised to ask the question. So, Captain, I'm putting that to you. I'm sure she's listening. Is it time to pack it up and go? Or from your own standpoint and the response and the coordination that you see the government putting together or delivering, what do you see?
What I see, first of all, PsyOps, psychological operations. It happens to be a favorite pastime of ours, given my former career trajectory. In intelligence operations, psychological operations is what the man on the street could call propaganda. And propaganda, the way we know it, could be white, black, or gray. So let's use that to answer the lady's question. What she's seeing precedes what she hears. And the reason is simple. Light moves faster than sound. So what the government are saying doesn't get to her as fast as what she's seeing. And because light is faster than sound, naturally so, the quantum physicists will tell you, we now agree that seeing is believing. So when you see a lot of things happening, social media is, replete with a lot of them. You see live renditions of very horrible, scary activity. And then you hear the government officials telling you, you know what, be law abiding. No one tells you how to be law abiding. Law abiding suddenly begins to look like, you know what, when they come and they want to kill you, don't take laws into your hands, just cooperate with them and die. You're now going to begin to get people who are law abiding like that lady, begin to say, okay, I could just walk away. I could just walk away. In the last 5, 6, 7 years, you see the cemeteries have grown exponentially larger, simply because we now use excavators to bury people. And those who are seeing this thing run to the social contract between themselves and government. And like, look, we've given up the right to take laws into our hands. We've given up the right to bear arms. We've given up a lot of things so there can be a state. There can be an organized space we call a country. What can you do to make us a bit safer in our homes? And what you hear is be law abiding. Go about your daily activities without fear or hindrance. But what you are seeing is the threats getting bolder. They do more daring things by the act. If today they did 1, tomorrow they're going to do +10. And that depletes or erodes the confidence, the reckoning, and the majesty of the populace for governance. So those who are still very law-abiding, those who may not be as, temperamental, you say, okay, why don't I just consider looking for a safer haven? Now, what's the way forward? It's still in psyops. Something about the human is every single human you see on the planet is mind-driven. You know, it's mind-driven. I'll give you an example of religion with all due respect now. The 2 religions first get to your heart and the rest is done. So if you're mind-driven, I mean, corporate organizations like yours understand what I'm saying. That's why marketing, it comes high on your budgets. It's about getting that subconscious consumer. Once subconsciously you have a space in his mind, anytime he thinks your product, that's the first thing he thinks of. That's what jingles do. It's called auto-suggestion. Psyops-wise, covert operations globally, right from the end of from the end of the Cold War, 45, we've seen a lot of projects that were meant at redefining the thinking of the people globally. Some were covert, some were overt, intelligence-driven. Coming back home, our National Security Agency and our National Orientation Agency have work to do. It's really not about whether they are getting bolder or whether they're not. It's about what the people see much more than what they hear. Seeing is believing. What the people see frequently has a subconscious impact in molding their perceptions. A very easy way to understand what I'm saying is the parents, every parent at home is conscious of what his child sees because he knows that that is going to form the character of that child and its perception. So basically, psyops, as you said, is key. And looking outside, inward, what comes across today to any peace-loving Nigerian is we have reached a tipping point where people are bold enough to do daring things that rubbish the majesty and reckoning of the state, home and abroad. Then you begin to see that there is a seesaw relationship. You know, the less reckoning we get, the higher invisibility and notoriety they seem to command. Lastly, for those who read a lot, what we're seeing is not new on the planet. Colombia, the Italian mafiosi, they did it. they were able to etch into the subconscious of the local populace who started to see them as benefactors. And it's much more difficult for you to recover when you get to that stage. We are not yet there. A narrative is what is required. A narrative that is going to be actually very inclusive of one and all. Then we back it with the right visual propaganda. And before you know it, this thing will be done within, if we projectize it, let's say 1 year, we'll be able to make our space very untenable. Because one thing at my consults that we have in common in Nigeria today, if you talk about it, we all unify despite the challenges, is fear. You talk football, you talk religion, you talk ethnicity, politics. From what we monitor on social media from our consults, Nigerians will balkanize. But trust me, when you talk about insecurity and fear, even two people who never see eye to eye will agree on that. Now there is a very, very significant window of opportunity there. That should be the starting point. That should be the pivotal point. We all agree there is fear in the land. We all agree there is insecurity. Then let's build on that and begin to explore other areas we could possibly agree on. And PSYOPs-wise, psychological operations-wise, subconscious Nigeria-wise, you'll see us unify, because anything we do as humans, as I said, is mind-driven. Get to the mind place, and you see Nigeria transform overnight.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you very much. I'm sure she's not leaving for now with that response. It inspires hope even in my own heart. So I'm going to go to questions from the audience in a minute, but I need to very quickly ask Patrick. We've spoken about what should be as against what is. What I want to ask you is, how should it then be? We've spoken about PSYOPs and why it's important. All the stuff we see in the social media, a number of it being not being based on facts, but from your knowledge of the people at the very local level, how do you suppose we need to engage to get through to them? What has to be done? How should it be done to begin to, one, restore that sense of belonging to a nation called Nigeria? And, you know, so it's not enough that we craft all these messages top down, but we need to understand what language these people would like to hear and how, you know, it should be told to them, what channels we should pass the messages through. What are your thoughts, Patrick, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. My thoughts really, it's, I think the way the country, the governance is structured now, we are not making good use of the traditional institutions. These are the people that are closer to the people. They will be the ones to be able to instill confidence or encourage their people to understand the issues that are really and truly on ground. And though, of course, when some of these traditional rulers are even being adopted these days without any hesitation. But the truth is that in those days, these traditional institutions, before they became political, because some of them today are now political minded and not driven to the issue of their communities. These were the people that through them you pass information to the people, and they are respected. In the northern part of Nigeria, the traditional institutions are respected. In the southwestern part of Nigeria, they are respected. I know that in some areas, there are some disconnect between the traditional institutions and the people. There's a mistrust between them. But really, these are the people that could help to pass this information of hope and of what, in terms of talking about PSYOPs, what can be done and the true situation of the country. Then secondly, somebody mentioned about I think it's you that talked about National Orientation Agency. I'm sorry to say that this agency seems not to be existing because people are not feeling the impact. I remember those days when we were quite young. There was a time where we had, I don't know if any of you can remember, Andrew, no checkout, and we used to hear it and watch it on TV, where this jingle comes on, and then there was no social media, no WhatsApp and all that. So all of us believed that there was no need to check out because we had been told that we should not check out and all that. And it worked. It really worked at that time because all of us have agreed that the problem we're seeing today, it's not just today, it's been there and somehow we'll pass it. And that led my organization. We are working on the history of Nigerian insecurity. We're digging back to after the Civil War. How this insecurity, how did it come up? How did we overcome them to this point? What mistakes, what they do not correct that breeds this thing? Because it's becoming a recycling decimal every now and then. We had Matasini, we had the Kaduna religious riots, we had so many of these things happen. Even the criminals we used to have, Oyenusi, we used to have Anini, then those who held us all bound. So, but still, we have not been able to learn from how those issues were managed so that we'll be able to prevent them from happening. That really is the issue. We need to be able to look back, get to understand what did we do right that helped us to solve these problems, and how can we implement those things or improve upon them. Jumoke talked about the issue of statistics. In this country, we don't have statistics. There's no statistics to back up some of the issues that we're talked about here. Statistics is important because it will help us to know whether we are making progress or are we still going round the circle. So if we can be able to engage the traditional institution properly and be able to make them not to go political, because today, because they are controlled by either the governors in their states or whoever political party they want to get affiliated to. So they lose confidence of some of their communities who are not in the same party with them or who are not in support of. If we can get that eliminated, engage them to be able to help to communicate properly the better ways for us to get out of this insecurity to better. If we can get the government agency talking about the NOA, that's the National Orientation Agency, to develop both to the locals and to everywhere, what is the proper message that we should be selling now? I know that the various security agencies are trying in their own way to be able to carry out non-kinetic operation to win the heart and mind of these communities. Take, for instance, the Nigerian Army. They carry out road construction. They provide waters to some communities to be able to get them on their side. But this should be well structured, not the way it's being done on an individual basis. I think that if we can get all this properly streamlined, then we can be able to move forward and say, yes, we can get out of this insecurity and not go back to it again, because it's going round the situation. We have had these agitations going on. We have had Matasini, which is similar to Boko Haram, but now more defined and well organized because of the involvement of ISIS and ISWAP and Al Qaeda and all that. But it's also similar to it. We have had issues. Just crisis has been going on to the extent that was a time there was a state of emergency in Jos and Plateau State and all that. Yet we're still going back to that situation now. We should be able to look back to these situations and find out how did we overcome them, then in building or taking some of all these things into whatever solution that we can develop now.
Thank you, Patrick. So I hear you say we need to craft the right message, all messages, pass those messages through the right channels of influencers in these communities, largely the traditional leaders. And as we inspire hope with these messages, we must very quickly back hope inspired up with hard development programs. So it's not just talk. And clearly, the one thing we will not do is roll over. The one thing we will not do is give up on ourselves, on the nation, and the future generation of the country. It's a challenge that we face in our time. Therefore, it's a challenge that we must overcome in our time, so that the country that we hand over to the next generation is one that perhaps will be faced with the challenge of going to the moon or Mars or Jupiter, and not dealing with skirmishes and insecurities or terrorism, locally. Should Nigeria fail as a state, the impact will not only be on the people of Nigeria internally, it will literally destabilize the region. And Jumoke, I'm going to come to you later to get your views on what you suppose will happen to the region, and what elements we need to look out for to know that we're perhaps at that point where the regional equilibrium is already being tilted negatively because of what's going on in here, and some of the things that we need to very quickly look at. Also, of course, projecting further out to look at why, when you look at Nigeria's rating in the Fragile State Index, for example, we're number 12. And we're talking about 173 countries thereabout, which means we're 12th in line to failing as a state because of certain elements, security, social system, politics, and all of that, economy as well. And to bring this into perspective, Ghana is 113. And that's just 2 or 3 international boundaries away from us. How we got here and how this may affect the nation and how the world sees us and how this impacts foreign direct investment and the diversion of some of the natural investments that should have come into this environment now being diffused, largely into the region. Ghana, for example, Egypt, perhaps, these are some of the things that I need us to look at. But before we go there, we've asked, the audience to ask questions. So now let's take their questions, and we have a few. There are some questions here. So D.O. Avante, I hope you understand why I will be unable to ask the panelists your questions. It's a little too politically, I actually don't know the word now, but okay. But I'll ask one of your other questions. Beyond the awareness and orientation created by the agencies, how can government show and be seen to be really addressing the issues as opposed to playing to the gallery and witch hunting the media for speaking the truth? I'll leave that question to perhaps Okoyemi if you want to address that. Beyond the awareness and orientation created by the agencies, how can government show and be seen to be really addressing the issues as opposed to playing to the gallery and witch hunting the media for speaking the truth? So I'll let you answer that, but I'll read. Let me very quickly read some of the other questions, and then we'll go. Okay, so despite the fact that the Deputy Speaker of the House once said that it's not in the place of Nigerians in diaspora to comment on the security situation in Nigeria, there's someone here from the diaspora who would like to know genuinely what Nigerians in diaspora can do to help with the state of insecurity and what they can also do to help with development. So I'll leave that to you, Captain, to take. What can Nigerians in diaspora do to help solve this current state of insecurity and help with development as well? And okay. All right. Upong wants to know, what is the effect of cultural and tribal lineage between Sahel region of West Africa to banditry and terrorist activities in northern Nigeria with a growing trans-border terrorism. Patrick, I'll leave that to you to answer. What is the effect of cultural and tribal lineage between Sahel region of West Africa to banditry and terrorist activities in northern Nigeria with the growing trans-border terrorism? And now one question for Jumoke. Let's find your question. Okay, Paula Pampa would like to know what pragmatic means can be deployed to address these security gaps of resourcing, that's personnel resourcing for security agencies, making security agencies attractive to people to apply to all over again. And then, of course, giving them the right training, giving them the right gears, motivating them to develop the right attitude, and just basically getting our forces, expanded and grounded and well positioned to engage the challenges of the times. So I'll leave that to Jumoke to answer. So to Okoyemi first, over to you. Questions?
Okay, thank you. What can government do? I think we must, while we agreed that we must depoliticize conversations around security so that we can deal with them rationally. In spite of that, we must concede, I personally do believe that there are many legitimate areas of political and constitutional reform, and even economic reforms that may contribute to solving this problem. So for instance, we've spoken about one obvious one. We need to decentralize police. I think if that is done, it will build a lot of confidence in people that we want to solve the problem. And there are legitimate areas in which we need devolution of powers beyond security, so that the country becomes a little bit more competent and able to take care of its people, so that the government of Borno State can take care of the people in Borno State, can have the resources and the powers required to take care of the children, the youth, and all of that. So there are issues around devolution of powers, resource distribution between the federal and the state levels. I think the states, for me, need a lot more resources than they currently have relative to the federal government. I think that's where all of the social problems are being created, and that's where the solutions lie. So we need to consider those legitimate areas of constitutional reform, such as state policing, such as devolution of powers, such as resource allocation between the tiers of government, such as the structure of the local government system, to make them more competent and effective. All of those are legitimate areas of constitutional reform that would build a lot of, foster a lot of confidence if the government could do that. Beyond those constitutional ones, as somebody with a lot of interest in the economic issues, I think there are also areas of, one obvious example, agricultural sector reform that can create a lot of confidence and that can contribute to solutions around how do we modernize ranching? How do we improve agricultural practices? How do we improve the productivity of agriculture beyond ranching, forestry, in fisheries, in product and food production and all of them? If we did really get agriculture's production right across all of those segments, ranching, crop production, fisheries, forestry, all of the whole range, we would be doing a lot to occupy those large numbers of people who are unemployed and therefore easy recruits for whether it is banditry or Boko Haram or even area boys and all other negative social phenomena. So for me, the key thing, one key thing government can do is to embark on those required constitutional and economic reforms. And our government must, we must face some of the issues that complicate the conversation a bit. Once there's anything Government must be above board and must be seen to be a neutral arbiter. Once there's a perception, whether right or wrong, that this government is biased for any reason in favor of anybody, it loses the trust and the confidence of the people. And then that's when you see all these negative conversations that complicate the case around dealing with the security issue. So I would urge that, one, we need political reforms, we need constitutional reforms, and then we need some important economic reforms as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Captain, I'll come to you next, and then Patrick and Jimo.
Yes, indeed. To my brothers and sisters in diaspora, what can you do to support Nigeria? What can you do to contribute? I see it this way. From diaspora, it's like taking an outside-in perspective or view of what is happening in Nigeria, looking from the outside in. I consider diasporans, Nigerian diasporans, an asset to our country. Never mind the ones who go and do some things sometimes that puts us in the news for all the wrong things. But the good thing about these 200 million people, the most populous nation on Black Africa, is there's virtually nowhere on the planet you don't see at least one, which is good. So what we are not seeing is the fact that we have people who are native ability enabled, standing from the outside and looking in and telling us how we are seen globally. Okay, coming back home, I'm sure if I wanted no holds barred appraisal of myself, I'll ask my wife. Our children out there may not be saying pleasant things, but trust me, when it comes to hearing about yourself through the eyes of an European or an American, but this time around, who is your child that has stayed there long enough, then you are going to be getting some very rich feedback. So we cannot do without our diasporian brothers and sisters. They count for something, strategic intelligence-wise now. There are a lot of opportunities we've lost in the diaspora that intelligent communities of other countries would have lobbied the devil to extricate the subjects. I won't go into that now. So if you are a diasporan, of course, you can expect that not everything you say will find assent. There will be dissenting voices, there will be ascending voices, but you are going to forever be there to tell us what the world is seeing from that side, looking in. We are in here, we are looking out. So for me, given my kind of thinking and my kind of orientation, the more diasporians I have, in fact, the better. I'll give you a live example. After the 1958 declaration for the state of Israel, the Balfour Declaration, they had Jews scattered all over the world. And these Jews were leveraged upon by that fledgling young Israeli state to come in with ideas extravaganza. Even if you were a welder, Mother Israel will reach out to you. And because they were coming from all over the world, Israel virtually became a hybridized aggregate of ideas exponential. Nigeria has that potential. The National Security Agency, as I always said, has work to do. We are a bit shadowy and secretive in our operations, but that's where the joy is. We can begin to do things and put certain things in place that makes it so wonderful that people help us without even knowing they're helping us. So I see Nigerians in diaspora in virtually every aspect. You mention, is it music? You mention it, just mention it. I can't even begin to, and that for me is good news, because Nigeria can just become its own kind of United States where you virtually have every citizen from every nook and cranny of the world in there. Only in our own case, every single competency or professional savvy you can think of will know one or two Nigerians. So I'm excited. In fact, I'm going to leave here with a takeaway. I'll see if I can build a database of Nigerians in the diaspora and their competencies. Nigerians, I mean, it's exciting now, isn't it?
I'm not sure if Abike Dabiri won't be happy to pay for that.
Okay. So you've just given me something to go and, play. You've just given me, I'm excited. Thanks for the question, whoever asked. But you've just opened some brain neurons in my head. And look, Nigeria can be so intimidating, culturally, population-wise, talents-wise, you name it. We need to look at that and exploit it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Captain. Thank you so much. Patrick, over to you, but very quickly, so I manage our time well. So here's what I'm gonna, so when you're done, Jumoke, when you answer your question, dovetail that into speaking to the regional issue that I mentioned earlier. Then when you're done, I'll give everybody 1 minute for their closing remarks, and then we close. All right? So Patrick, you now.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to be fast with this because it's very, very interesting. Talking about the Sahel region of West Africa and the banditry, let's cast our mind back to when did banditry as it is today began in this part of West Africa or in Nigeria, or when the terrorism began. This can be said that it has not had serious effect up until the fall of Libya, when so many arms, military arms were being circulated. First to test that was Mali, and before then Boko Haram keyed in on them, and we can see what is happening. But the effect of banditry really began to take very stronger, dangerous dimension with what is happening in the northwest of Nigeria. And this can be said, many of us have actually talked about Fulani herdsmen, or what Jumoke did call the pastoral militants. And yes, pastoralist militant, and that cannot be far-fetched, because I remember in 2003, as far back as that, I was in Jigawa, and what was the biggest issue was the cattle rustling. The Fulanis were crying as at then that their cattle were being rustled by some people who come in and cut away their cattle and kidnap their family, their wives and children and all that. As of then, we have not started experiencing what we are now having. Now, later on, it changed. Now, some of them had to hire who they believe they can help protect their cattle from them. And that was when we started seeing some people who carry AK-47 in the forests, helping to provide some level of security for these cattle and the Fulani hiders who are there. And now it has grown that they realize that these criminals have realized that cattle rustling is not as profitable as if we can adopt a large number of persons, because learning from what was happening by the middle of the 20s, I'm talking about 2006, 2007, and 2008, kidnapping of persons, especially in the southeastern part of Nigeria, was very, very lucrative. Then it was called a business of high profit with lesser risk, because you adopt somebody and a person pays 250 million naira to be released. And this also was what these bandits, people who turn out to become bandits today, saw as a very big business, that we don't need to waste our time carrying cattle any longer. We can carry human beings because there are people who value them, who are ready to pay. So talking about cultural the effects and the tribal lineage. I'll give an instance. In Katsina State, there is a man that lives, he has a home, his house, his compound is between Nigeria and Niger Republic. He has 4 wives. 2 of his wives are living in Niger in the same compound. One is living with him in Nigeria. So he crosses every day to Niger to see his wife and his children just because it's in the same compound. That is how most of the borderline has been. So it's easier for people, both the good ones than the bad people, to come into Nigeria without being harassed, without being stopped, even when they're bearing arms. And that has helped the banditry activities that we're having today. That also helped because Nigeria is a signatory to ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS Treaty of Protocol of Free Movement of Persons and Goods. So you cannot stop, even the border areas that are manned, there's a limit of stop or control you can carry out there, so long as they're ECOWAS citizens and they come with their own belongings and all that. So it creates this problem that you don't know who is coming in to cause any damage in your country. And these are the link, these are the problem that Nigeria is experiencing today. And we have so many unmanned borders. So culturally, you have people who are belonging to the Niger or to Chad or to Cameroon or to Benin Republic, who move in for one reason or the other, for commercial purposes or for social purposes or cultural purposes. And the good ones come in and carry out the activities in well, but the bad ones come in to carry out, because Nigeria is in the eye of everybody in the Sahel region, in the whole Africa, in the whole world. We are the biggest economy. We are the most potential in terms of if you want to make money in the region. And so the attraction of banditry is in Nigeria. Most of these people that are carrying out this banditry are not Nigerians. Some of them are from the neighboring countries, even as far back as Guinea and even other countries. But they find a way down to Nigeria to carry out these nefarious activities. The other countries have a way of control because their citizens are ready to communicate. When any stranger comes into Ghana, that I know very well, the Ghanaian there in the community is ready to report to their community heads. We're seeing some strangers coming here. We don't understand what they're doing. And the security agencies are alerted and something. But in Nigeria, it's not the same because of, like what we said earlier, either the apathy because government is not close to the people, or ungoverned areas are everywhere. So really, to answer the question, the cultural and the tribal lineage is affecting the activities we're having today in the northern part of Nigeria. And it's something that can be checked or be controlled. It's not out of hand really, but it will take a lot of people putting their foot on the ground and making sure that we have a bit of control in this problem.
Thank you, Patrick. You actually scared me there. After speaking for like 7 minutes, you then said to answer the question. Yeah, Jumoke, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm going to answer the 2 questions that you had posed eloquently and in less than 5 minutes, because I know that we do need to wrap up. The first one is pragmatic means to address security gaps. And the very first is the reorientation of our security forces, moving from hard military strategies to a people-focused strategy and orientation. And how can we do this? This comes from the defense schools as well as our research institutions. And I would say that our Nigerian military is relatively professional, even with everything that is going on. They have remained professional on the field, but there's a disconnect between what they are doing tactically and how they relate with the people. And that attitudinal change of reorientation is needed so that they can see the people first, and then whatever strategies that they decide to embark on, put them at the center. Human security versus national security, thinking about how do we secure personal security, not how do we protect territorial integrity of Nigeria. So that shift has to be there with our military. And then, for this to happen, it has to come from the top. Leadership. What roles can leadership play in really incentivizing, whether it's people and whether it's the private sector, to be more involved in the defense sector? So we see, for example, in Israel, in Algeria, here, that there's private sector investment with the defense industry, and it's somewhat limited in Nigeria, even though it has started. That competition is needed because that reinforces our military capacity, and it also pushes people to want to work for the defense sector when they see that there's an enabling environment that private sector individuals can come in, can contribute, and can possibly harness our resources and our human capital in promoting strategies and training and intelligence that our state leaders and our own state institutions can possibly use in solving emerging as well as new security threats that are facing the country. And then the respect for the people at the front lines, paying their salaries on time, taking care of their families when, they unfortunately are deceased on the battlefield. We somewhat see a disconnect sometimes when our military officers and personnel complain that they are not well fed, as Captain Aliyu alluded to with agriculture, or that they feel like they've been abandoned at the forefront of the battlefield, that there's a disconnect between their commanders and Abuja. So we need to really come together. We're really respecting the profession with really incentivizing our soldiers as well as people who will not see the military as a way to make quick money, but as a way to show that they are Nigerian first before anything else. And to the second question about Nigeria and the regional implications, we are still the big brother of Africa. Where we are placed in the continent, we have so much to do. And I think this has to do with our foreign policy and what our leaders decide, what impact we want to have Nigerians have, not just on the African continent, but in the whole world. When it comes to military operations, we have accolades with peacekeeping operations in Africa from 1960s. If you look at our history, we've been at the forefront of mediation efforts with former President Obasanjo with Sudan, and we even have former President Goodluck Jonathan with the Malian coup. So we still have that big brother approach, but we need to really put into our forefront our foreign policies to really change how people see Nigeria, because we cannot promote African solutions to African problems if we don't look inward to know exactly what solutions we want to propose for ourselves. We cannot dictate to the outside world on this is what Africa needs, this is what Nigeria needs, if we don't take a good look at ourselves first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you very much. Really great responses to the two questions there. My concern, though, is when you ask the military to then begin to focus on personal security and not only territorial, you're literally asking them to be police at the same time as they are military, right? Because personal security, human security, now that's the purview of the police, right? But I hear you on the need for, however kinetic the strategy may be, there's always that need to engage the people and the community, and then create a balance between their physical or kinetic assignments, and the needs and the aspirations of the people. That said, I have changed my mind. I am giving you 30 seconds each for your closing remarks. We cannot afford one more minute. So again, Okoyemi, I will start with you. Closing remark, please.
Okay, thank you very much. 30 seconds. I just want to refer to a question I saw around resourcing, and the most Nigerians cannot believe the extent of the resource gap in policing. I've had cause to look closely at those figures. They are ridiculous. How much does one DPO in Lagos State or Ogun State get from the national budget of the police every year? You can't believe the answer. Whatever the figures are, they're perfectly useless to the guy. Therefore, the guy has to, so sometimes it's sad, but you then have to understand some of those things when they say bring money for photocopy, bring money for a statement, bring money for this. That is why these state security trust funds have come in, to bridge that huge, really, really silly gap between what is available and what needs to be done. Now, that should be regarded as a temporary intervention. It can never be a permanent solution. States will never become the permanent funders of federal police. And the solution, in my view, has to be that we have to decentralize policing in Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Patrick, 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I think that with the collection of everything that have been said and the question, the participants, I'm quite impressed with the participants and their interest to get some answers and clarity in some of the issues raised is quite good. And I believe that it tells that a whole lot of Nigerians are interested in us getting this insecurity behind us. And this is a beginning. And I believe that more conversations and interactions on this will help us to draw out a much better way and get the actors themselves to be able to implement this. I have always said that you can't use political solution to solve security issues. Security is security, and you must take it, because without security, there's no meaningful development that can take place. And so I'm happy that everybody is interested in making sure that we move away from this insecurity and move towards a prosperous, a peaceful, and a united country.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. Appreciate that. Captain, 30 seconds.
Yes, just in 30 seconds, I will speak to as many people as are listening. Nigeria has always been here, is here, and will be here. The magic about us is, whichever way you look at it, we trend. What makes that so exciting for me is we are relevant. You can't come to West Africa and not come to Nigeria. If you wanted to sell toothpicks in West Africa, you have to come to Nigeria, because you're looking at a 200 million market. To our armed forces, I say securing 200 million people is a crazy task. So expect it to just be as crazy. The challenges should excite you, make you stronger, better, bolder, wiser. It's just a function of mindset. Still, again, the NOA and the NSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain. And Jimo, over to you. 30 seconds, please.
Oh, of course. So I don't know if you can hear me because my internet is a little bit unstable. But with this discussion, I do have hope for our country. I have hope for Nigeria. We not only talked about the problems and the issues and the challenges that are facing us as a country, but we also talked about possible solutions on how to move our country forward. And I'm really hoping that participants, as well as government officials, military officials, look at this webinar on YouTube in your deliberations and in really rethinking about our security challenges and possible ways of how to communicate what you are doing at the top to us at the ground, so that we can really, really support you, whether it's private sector, whether it is us as Nigerians. We all need to come together to secure our land so that we are great again as a country.
Thank you, Jumoke. Thank you. And in the spirit of coming together, this is how I will spend my own 30 seconds. I get 30 seconds as well. All right. And I'm going to use that to remind everyone, the panel, as well as the audience, of our prayer. This is our collective prayer. It's what we signed up for. And I'm back to the anthems again. The second stanza. O God of creation, direct our noble cause. Guide our leaders right. Help our youth the truth to know. In love and honesty to grow, and living just and true. Great lofty heights attain to build a nation where peace and justice reign. Inasmuch as there are people in government whose primary responsibility is to bring this to bear, this anthem shows that it's a collective responsibility that we build a nation where peace and justice reign. On that note, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share your thoughts, your experiences with us, and the audience as well. Thank you for your participation, your comments, and the questions. You have made it a worthwhile session. Until we'll end the webinar series 7.0, let's keep staying safe and contributing our quota to the development and growth of this country. Thank you very much.